Okay, I think we're live. Gonna test the audio out here. That's why I'm starting a little early. I know I'm normally pretty quiet. I did order a new mic the other day though. That should be here soon. That should help with the audio. Okay, the audio seems fine. We'll go ahead and get started here in just 1 second. Like I said, I am about 10 minutes early, 12 minutes. Okay. We'll go ahead and start. First I want to say... Oh, you hear me, okay. Am I live? Okay. It looks like I'm live again. That's very annoying. I guess my computer froze. I had to restart it. Very annoying. Very annoying. I think we're back. Very good. Well, I will do my spiel again. Are we good? Yeah, we're good. Okay, like, follow, notification bell if you want to follow me on Twitter at anti-imperial US or anti-imperial STL. It's in the description. You can also follow me on Rumble. I plan to start streaming there soon. Okay, we'll go ahead and start. Hopefully we don't have any more technical difficulties. We're gonna start today with Biden's visit to Israel. I have 2 articles here about that. A lot of articles open here. Luckily, when the computer crashed and I restarted, it was able to restore all these windows. I didn't have to go through and open them all again. But yeah, so Biden is in Israel. It's the first leg of his Middle East tour. He's going to Saudi Arabia next. You know, there's of course the administration is saying the goal of the visit is to, you know, protect peace in the region or whatnot. Really, what they're doing is, you know, 1, harassing Iran, and 2, he's going to go beg Saudi Arabia to produce more oil. We're going to start with this article from Scott Ritter that he published on Press TV, I believe today, the 14th, yeah. He makes some good points in it. He says, what happens when you take a dysfunctional president, fly him overseas to meet with a dysfunctional government of a dysfunctional country, and have them discuss dysfunctional policy? And he says nothing happens. He does a quick background. I'll go ahead and read it. I think it's good. A quick history lesson. President Barack Obama helped bring the JCPOA, or the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which is the official name of what's typically called the Iran nuclear deal. Obama brought it to fruition back in 2015 over strenuous Israeli objections. In May 2018, President Donald Trump precipitously withdrew from the JCPOA after succumbing to Israeli pressure to do so. Since that time, both the U.S. and Israel have come to regret that decision. Iran responded to the U.S. withdrawal and subsequent restoration of so-called maximum pressure sanctions by implementing procedures permitted under the terms of the JCPOA to halt compliance with its JCPOA-specific obligations in the case of violations of the JCPOA by other parties. So just a quick rundown. No one ever violated the JCPOA until Trump pulled out, right? The International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, they did regular inspections of Iranian nuclear of uranium enrichment facilities, and they never found that Iran was enriching uranium past the agreed-upon limits of the JCPOA. The idea of the JCPOA was it was going to allow Iran to enrich uranium enough to have a nuclear a nuclear energy program and a nuclear research program, but prevent them from getting a weapon. Of course, Iran never said that they ever wanted to obtain a nuclear weapon. It was always made up by the West, and that's where the JCPOA came out of, right? Trump pulled out of it disastrously, right? You know, that's just that's one of the things I always use as an example for why the U.S. isn't trusted on the world stage, right? They do all this work to get the JCPOA through, and then they just decide they're going to pull out of it, right? And really, what that shows is there's a lack of continuity between U.S. leaders, right? If you're a nation that's dealing with the U.S., wait 8 years, right? That's all you have to do. You have to outwait the leader. There's always going to be a new leader in the United States in at least 8 or at most 8 years, But we'll continue with this article here. The result of the U.S. submission to the whims of Israel is that Iran has significantly furthered its nuclear enrichment programs, right? So with the U.S. pulling out of the JCPOA, Iran has no reason now to not continue enrichment, right? The West is terrified of Iran getting a nuclear weapon because nuclear weapons guarantee sovereignty for nations, right? That's what we see. That's why the U.S. hasn't invaded North Korea again. That's why the U.S. Didn't invade the Soviet Union back in the mid 20th century. That's why the U.S. hasn't. That's why the U.S. hasn't invaded. I can't think of any other examples, but North Korea in the Soviet Union in the mid 20th century are the best examples, right? Nuclear weapons guarantee sovereignty for nations, and if Iran had nuclear weapons, then it would guarantee that they get to exist. That's why Israel has nuclear weapons, right? It's an open secret, pretty much, that Israel has nuclear weapons, and those were likely obtained from the U.S., right, with help from the U.S., because that's, that ensures Israel gets to exist as a nation. So that's the real fear behind Israel. That's the real fear that the West has about Iran getting a nuclear weapon. Iran's not going to be overtly aggressive. They're not going to get nuclear weapons and immediately start bombing Tel Aviv and bombing Washington. No, they want to defend their territory, and if they ever do decide to get a nuclear weapon, that's what they'll want them for. Continuing with the article here, he gets down to Joe Biden's visit. Enter Joe Biden. The fact remains that Israel is not, and probably never will be, in position to initiate and sustain viable military action against Iran. One thing that Biden and Israeli leadership have been talking about is further research with weapons. They plan to do a joint laser development program for air defense. The U.S. actually already has a program like this for its aircraft carriers. Instead of using conventional minigun type anti-missile defense systems on carriers, they want to use lasers because lasers can't run out of ammo, and it's harder to overwhelm. It's harder to overwhelm a laser. Back to the Scott Ritter article. He makes some good points here if we get down. At the end of the day, intent must conform to capability, and here the U.S. lacks the ability to back up Biden's big words. Biden said that the U.S. will protect Israel, right? If Israel comes under attack from any nation, the U.S. will respond, said Biden. Now, what that response will entail, he didn't say. Obviously, American military strength in the Middle East is fading, especially post-Afghanistan. If the world is undergoing a major energy crisis because of oil supply disruption brought about by the removal of Russian oil from the European and American markets, imagine the economic catastrophe that would occur if the oil production capacity of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the UAE were permanently eliminated because of Iranian military action. He's saying that if conflict did break out between Iran and Israel, that Iran would strike at the oil-producing capacity of those Gulf states, those Western-allied Gulf states, which would cripple the West, right? The West needs that oil right now, that oil and gas to power their entire economies, right? So that, and there's really no defense against that if conflict were to break out. If you remember last year, the rebel groups in Yemen, one of them launched attacks on Saudi oil fields, and they did massive damage. I believe it was the second largest oil field in the world that they attacked, and did massive damage. There was no defense against it, and so that's pretty good article here if you want to go read it on Press TV. Moving on, though, the U.S.-Israel plan joint laser development, right? They're going to work together more in the military sector. Nothing new there. Let's watch this. I have a few comments after it.
The scourge of anti-Semitism still marches around the world. We must never forget the horrors which an unchecked hatred can lead. And that's why I immediately, when I returned, I wanted to visit Yad Vashem. When I landed yesterday, to bear witness, to remember, to renew our vow of never, never again. At the same time, the Israel of today is not the Israel of 50 years ago. You've cultivated new resources, capabilities, new relationships, including a growing integration with neighbors in the region. You have new tools that keep Israel strong and secure. You have an ironclad commitment from the United States of America to Israel's security, an ironclad commitment. We'll make sure that Israel can defend itself by itself. When I was vice president under President Obama, we passed a record-setting agreement for Israel's security, $38 billion over a 10-year period. And I was proud that last year we also provided an additional $1 billion to replenish Israel's Iron Dome supplies, making 2022 the largest single year of military assistance that Israel has ever received. Yesterday, I viewed some of Israel's Iron Dome technology, as well as a very promising new Iron Beam technology, a laser-enabled missile defense system. These technologies and advancements are critical. They're critical because every rocket that is intercepted is a potential life, perhaps more, that has been saved. As we move forward together, partners in both security and in innovation, the United States and Israel defense sectors will cooperate in new high-energy laser weapon systems that can defend Israeli lives as well as lives of American service members.
So I have several comments on that. First of all, you always hear Israeli officials and American officials talk about, anti-Semitism, and they act like there's this major sense of anti-Semitism in the Middle East. It's not anti-Semitism. It's anti-Zionism, right? People are anti-Zionist. They don't believe in that Israel should exist as a state. It's not that they're anti-Semitic. It's really the other way around. Israel is incredibly Islamophobic, right? Israel has, said many times throughout its history that they want to create violence in the Muslim world, right? They don't want the Muslim world united. That's part of why they attack Syria. That's part of why they're so that's part of why they attack Iran. They don't want Israel is incredibly it's an ethno-nationalist country in a way, right? And they pretend it's the other way around. They pretend people treat them that way. No, they treat others that way. Another thing I just want to say is listen to the tongue baths that Israel gets. These Western politicians, Trump right? Trump was a lapdog for Israel. Biden's doing it now. They just bow to Israel immediately. It's really gross. And you notice how he portrays everything as defensive for Israel. We're gonna help them with their Iron Dome. We're gonna develop the Iron Beam, he calls it, right? Everything's defensive for Israel. They act like Israel is under constant attack. No, it's the other way around, right? The people that Israel borders are under constant attack from Israel. Israel is actually the only country in the world, I believe, that doesn't have a border, right? Israel says they don't have a border because they're constantly trying to expand into territory that's not theirs, right? They've been doing that since they came into existence. You see, let's look up Israel real quick. Spelled it wrong. So right here, look, you take a look here, the Golan Heights up here, that's not a part of Israel, right? And many you look at maps, it'll show it as a part of Israel. It's a part of Syria. That part of Syria was stolen by Israel, I believe back in the 70s. I could be wrong at the time, but all this land is occupied, right? It's been occupied for a long time. It was first occupied by the British, and now, of course, since the end of World War II, the British and the Americans have created the state of Israel, and now they occupy it, right? This is occupied territory. This territory has been occupied for centuries. First by the British, and now by the Israeli puppets, pretty much, that they've put in power. But Israel's constantly expanding. Israel is not defensive in any way. The Iron Dome, I mean, sure, I guess it is a defensive system, and it does defend against rockets sometimes, but, those rockets are being launched by people that Israel is attacking, right? Israel doesn't have a closed border because they constantly want to expand their border, and they pretty much say that. They don't hide it very well. They're very open about that. They believe they should control the entire Levant, right? Israel is not defensive. They're aggressive. Remember that. Don't let them fool you on that. Biden touched on how the U.S. added an extra $1 billion to military aid to Israel. That's really not that surprising. They do that every year, right? More and more money to Israel. I wanted to touch on Iranian drones. I was talking about that the other day. There was, Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, said that Iran is prepared to supply Russia with many drones. Russia hasn't responded to that. The Iranian foreign minister did respond. He said that they have no intention to, but we'll see what happens. It seems like it could happen. It wouldn't be surprising. Iranian drones are actually quite advanced. Russia hasn't. We talked about this in the last stream. Russia hasn't over the years invested a lot in a sort of attack drones like the U.S. has. The U.S. has obviously invested a lot into drones, and a lot of those drones have been operated in the Middle East, and Iran has been able to sort of reverse engineer some of this technology, and it touches on this in this RT article. If I can find it. Some Iranian drones, here it is. Some Iranian UAVs were inspired unmanned aerial vehicles, if you're not aware, were inspired by the U.S. designs. For example, the Quads Yassir is based on the Boeing In-Situ Scan Eagle, intercepted by the Iranians in 2012, while the Shahid 171 Simorg, and I don't know how to say that word, have a lot in common with the RQ-170 Sentinel that violated Iranian airspace in 2011. Right, so Iran's drone program is actually quite advanced, thanks to the U.S. The U.S. has helped Iran with that quite a bit over the years, and so it's very possible they could supply them, or they could supply Russia with some. We don't know. Putin is scheduled to meet with Raisi, the Prime Minister of Iran, and Erdogan, the Prime Minister in Turkey, later this week, I believe. So we'll get more information on it then, I'm sure. I will continue to follow this, though, since I've talked about it. My guess is Iran will supply Russia with some drones. I don't think that's a bad thing, either. Right, the U.S. supplies countries with weapons all the time. Countries far, far, far worse than Russia, right? Countries that commit, look at the amount of arms they supply Saudi Arabia with and Israel with, and they carry out genocidal acts with those arms, right? So Iran giving drones or selling drones to Russia, whatever it may be, I don't see a problem with that, Countries are allowed to do what's in the best interest of them. 3 more countries set to join BRICS. This came as a surprise. At least one of the countries, Saudi Arabia, is a bit of a surprise. Turkey doesn't surprise me as much, and Egypt is very interesting. Obviously, these countries joining BRICS would have major impacts on things. Saudi Arabia, vital to the petrodollar. If it were to join BRICS, I'm sure the U.S. would be very upset. And that's a part of Biden's visit to the Middle East, right? He has several objectives. Like I said, they say it's all about security, peace. Really, they're trying to escalate with Iran, and they want to beg Saudi Arabia to produce more oil. But also, they want to beg Israel and Saudi Arabia to not strengthen ties with Russia and China. They don't want them strengthening ties with the Russians and the Chinese. But this news is huge, right? If they do decide to join BRICS, that'll be massive. Egypt will be massive because of the Suez Canal, right? We've talked about Atlanticism and how the West wants to control the trade routes. So not controlling the Suez Canal, being a member of BRICS, right? The country that owns the Suez Canal, Egypt, being a member of BRICS would be massive and a major blow to the Atlanticis, which we always love to see. Turkey would also be a big deal, too. You think of the Bosphorus Strait, right? So if you think about it in terms of trade routes, this is massive. And Saudi Arabia, right? The Arabian Peninsula is right there next to the Red Sea. It's right next to the Persian Gulf, right? It's massive when it comes to the Atlanticis, right? They're terrified of this move. If they were to join, this says it wouldn't be until next year in the summit in South Africa. Yeah. That's very, very big. This is definitely something we'll follow. BRICS is an amazing organization. It certainly has the capability to be, right? It accounts for 40% of the global population. and nearly a quarter of the world's GDP, so they can't be ignored, right? The West can try to ignore them or try to delegitimize them all they want, but you can't really. BRICS is a massive organization, and BRICS is going to do big things, and the West is terrified of that. Moving on to another article about a BRICS member, Brazil's President Bolsonaro, Jair Bolsonaro. I thought this was kind of funny. He said he's figured out how to end the Russia-Ukraine conflict, right? He says, I'll tell him my opinion, talking about Zelensky, I believe. Yeah, he's supposed to talk to Zelensky. I'll tell him my opinion, what I think. You read through this article, he never actually says what his plan is. The Brazilian leader is scheduled to speak with Zelensky by phone on Monday. He says this war has been causing huge disruption, less for Brazil, much more for Europe. Right, he declined to offer details of his proposed peace plan. It's very funny, right? You know, this guy just has a magic solution all of a sudden, and he won't share any of the details. We'll see what happens, right? We'll see what happens. This is a big deal. Contents of the next EU sanctions package is revealed. It seems like they're going to target Russia's gold exports, and they want to tighten up loopholes because, European countries that have signed on for these sanctions have been violating them secretly, right? Because these sanctions are absurd. Look what they're doing, right? The euro is in the toilet, and the ruble is up, right? The exact opposite of what the Europeans said would happen is happening, and it's very possible that was the plan all along. If you look at it from the perspective of Wall Street, they want Europe to decline, right? This is very good. If you're a Western corporation, if you're a rich person in the West that has business interests in Europe, this could be good for you, right? It'll allow you to buy up more of the European market, control more of the European market, and we know that these people are addicted to degrowth, right? You see the food supply is already in crisis, and now they're passing these organic farming laws in the Netherlands, and this is a big deal, right? This is a big deal. These sanctions, that as they further the sanctions, it's only going to make it worse on Europe, right? It's not going to make it worse on Russia. It will inconvenience Russia in the short term. But at this point, they stole $650 billion of Russia's sovereign wealth, right? So, they really can't do much more damage. They've gotten to a point where they've burned their bridge with Russia. Russia no longer has a reason to work with them. Russia doesn't care. Continue to sanction us, fine. China's not going to sanction us. The BRICS countries won't sanction us. BRICS Plus, Russia will go and sell all of their oil, all of their gas, all of their wheat in the East. Right, they'll sell it all to China, they'll sell it all to India, Japan. I heard like 99% of Japan's natural gas is imported, right? These countries depend on Russia, and, they're going to continue to buy from Russia. China needs a huge amount of food, they need a huge amount of gas to continue their economy and to, strengthen their economy and grow their economy. That's what these countries are about. You're not going to get these countries to sign on to these degrowth policies, these degrowth sanctions. It's absurd. Europe's shooting itself in the foot. The leaders are shooting themselves. The leaders are shooting the people in the foot. The leaders obviously probably won't be affected that much. They'll be in their warm palaces and eating warm food all winter. But the people of Europe will not, right? The people of Europe, this is going to hurt them a lot. I mean, the best that Europe could hope for this winter is bad, right? The best they could hope for is bad. Right? They can hope that it doesn't become catastrophic. Ridiculous, man. Ridiculous policy. Ridiculous sanctions. Moving on to U.S. threatens Russian oil exports. Treasury Secretary Yellen, she's talking about trying to get Russia to sign on to a price cap on oil, right? They're trying to fix prices on the global market. We'll see what happens. China discussed it with the U.S. China would be interested in that because they, like I said, have to buy most of their oil and natural gas from the global market, and if they could guarantee lower prices, that's very good for them. But the U.S. is trying to fix prices. It's what the West does, right? Russia doesn't have to work with them. We just said that, right? The West has burned their bridge with Russia. Every bridge they had with Russia, it's been burned. Russia doesn't have a reason really to work with them at this point. Things can change, and hopefully things do change. Hopefully we get to a point where there can be more diplomacy. But it has to be in good faith by the U.S., and nothing the U.S. says is in good faith, right? Even Biden's, he says we have an ironclad commitment to Israel. No, they don't. No, they don't. If they decide turning on Israel is in the best interest of Wall Street, they'll do it like that, right? They don't care. Their word means nothing, absolutely nothing. So Russia has no reason to work with them, right? This was interesting. Biden said Moscow must suffer, quote, a strategic failure, unquote. He went on to say all the, that's what this is all about, right? Make Russia, hurt Russia in Ukraine, right? Kill as many Russians as possible in Ukraine. That's what they want. And it's disgusting, right? They want to pile up the body count of both Russia and Ukraine, right? This is to the last Ukrainian, to the last mercenary, right? I don't feel much remorse from any of those mercenaries. They're not good people. But the Ukrainians that are being conscripted, the men that, they've never fought a day in their life, and they do a week or two of training, and the Ukrainians send them to the front line, and they get blown up by a caliber missile or Russian artillery. It's horrible, right? And that's what the U.S. is doing. They're using the Ukrainians as cannon fodder, right? They're using the Ukrainians to try to hurt Russia. And that was their plan all along. Right, Petro Poroshenko, the former Ukrainian president, admitted that. He said that, the Ukraine used the Minsk agreements so that they could create a powerful armed forces to use against Russia in the future. Right? They admit it themselves, man. They admit it themselves. They're mask off nowadays, right? They don't hide things anymore because it's been so normalized. This level of this level of just corruption and moral depravity. It's been normalized to such a point that they just say it out in the open. It's truly insane. U.S. provided Kiev with intelligence of targets. This is very important because what are the Ukrainians good at? They're good at harassing, terrorizing, and killing civilians, right? That's what they do. That's what the United States does too, right? And the United States allies, right? We were just talking about the Israelis. But the U.S., we do this already, but the U.S. has been providing, intelligence, satellite images, and things like that to the Ukrainians and directing their strikes. And likely many of the Ukrainian strikes are ordered by U.S. officials, right? It's likely the U.S. is telling the Ukrainians what to do. And they do it, and they strike civilians, they kill civilians. Obviously, they've been doing it since 2014 and the Donbass, but since the start of Russia's operation, they've started attacking Russian cities. Belgorod is the one that's attacked the most. We'll pull that up on the map. I'm sure I spelled it wrong. Right here. Belgorod is sort of a border city between Russia and Ukraine. They've attacked other Russian cities, but that's what they do. They strike civilians, and the West is not only providing the arms that are used for the strikes in some cases, but they're providing the intelligence that's used to carry out these strikes. So the U.S. is heavily involved, man, and it's not just we're providing arms. We're doing everything. We're doing all of it. We're providing the arms. We're training the people with the arms. We're giving them intelligence. They're likely giving them the orders on what to strike. Right? It's disgusting. They're killing civilians. That's what they're doing. They've shown that they have a very, very hard time striking Russian military targets. And that's not surprising, right? Russia's air defense systems are the best in the world. Even the West says that. The S-400, the S-300, various other systems, they're capable of defending themselves from missiles. Now, the one thing that the West can try to do is overwhelm the Russian missile defense, like the Israeli Iron Dome. The Israeli Iron Dome can be overwhelmed, and that's what you see. That's what you saw happen last May when there was fighting in Israel. The Iron Dome would be overwhelmed by so many missile attacks that some would get through. So the idea is that the Ukrainians can use the HIMARS to try to overwhelm the Russian missile defense system, and then use ballistic missiles to get through, and of course hit civilians, like I said. And the other day, the Ukrainians, they hit like some chemical factory. I forget the exact chemical. And massive explosion because of this chemical, large fire, and they tried to pass it off as the Ukrainians were able to hit a Russian ammo depot with the HIMARS, right? And it's all wrong, right? They hit a chemical factory, and not only was it not HIMARS, or I'm sorry, not only was it not an ammo depot, but a chemical factory, it wasn't HIMARS either. They hit up the Tonkin U, which is their ballistic missiles that they use. And, the Lockheed Martin is trying to advertise the HIMARS pretty much, right? Make it look like the Israelis or the Ukrainians are doing well with the HIMARS. Lockheed Martin can then sell more HIMARS, right? That's what's going on here. The military-industrial complex is making huge amounts of money off of this conflict. Huge, massive sums. Moving on. The head of Serbia said that Ukraine conflict is already a world war. It's an interesting take. Obviously it's not exactly right, but I see what he's saying, right? The West is, the so-called collective West, United West, whatever you want to call it, is pouring in so many arms, right? You have the entire EU involved, the United States, I believe Japan plays sanctions, Australia, Canada. So that is a good chunk of nations that are involved in this conflict. So I see what he means. I wouldn't call it a world war, though, right? It's a war between Russia and Ukraine, and it's a proxy war for many other nations. That's what it is, right? It's not a world war, but I see what he's saying. He said, quote, "We should understand that amid the world war, because all the talks that it is a regional or a local war must be dropped. The entire Western world is fighting against Russia via Ukrainians." This is exactly what I was just saying. It is a global conflict, he said. And in a sense, he's correct, right? But it's not, obviously there's not boots on the ground from many, many nations, unless you count mercenaries, right? He went on to say, quote, "I know what awaits us. As soon as Vladimir Putin has done his work in Seversk, Bakhmut, and Soledar, after reaching the second line," I don't know how to say this, "he will come up with a proposal, and if the West, don't accept it, and they won't, all hell will break loose," he predicted without providing any details. So I don't know exactly what he's talking about, but it's interesting. He's saying that he's saying that he thinks the Russians have a point that they want to get to, a line, sort of line in the sand, so to speak, that they want to get to, and at that point they'll try to negotiate with the West. And he says if the West don't accept it, all hell will break loose. Maybe he's saying if the West doesn't accept it, then Russia will continue and take all of Ukraine. Who knows what he's trying to say? We'll see what happens. It'll probably be a while before we get to that point that he's talking about, even though, yeah. But he's completely right that this conflict could break out into a larger conflict at any point, right? What happens if a Polish air defense system or a Swedish air defense system, shoots down a Russian jet on accident, right? That could be catastrophic, right? And that's where we're at, right? We're at a point where just the littlest, tiniest slip up is World War III. There's actually a good story. It was there were some aerospace engineers, I believe this was back in the 80s or 90s, that built a small suborbital rocket that for some project they had at school. And this was in, I believe it was in Sweden or Finland, and they launched, I believe Finland, and they launched it from the coast, so right next to the ocean. And this is a suborbital rocket, right? So it was picked up by early detection system satellites in orbit, right? And most advanced countries, the United States, Russia, China, they have France, other countries, they have these satellites that detect missile launches. As soon as the launches begin, it detects it and sends the information back so that the country knows that it's happening. Well, when these aerospace students launched this suborbital rocket that they made, it was picked up by the Russian early warning system, and the Russians at first they thought, is this a nuclear attack, because it was right on the coast, and they had thought for years that if the West launched a nuclear attack, then their submarines would launch from that same area. And the Russians almost responded, right? They almost responded because they thought this was a nuclear weapon. And that's the amount of time you have to respond, right? If nuclear missiles are fired, the country has 10 minutes or so to respond. And we were that close, right? Just because some aerospace engineers or aerospace students, launched their suborbital rocket, and we that almost took us to World War III. So that shows you how close we always are to World War III. And then it's escalated with this conflict in Ukraine. Like I said, what happens when Poland or Finland or Lithuania fire? What happens when one troop gets a little too anxious and hits fire on a missile and shoots down a Russian plane or kills Russian soldiers? At that point, NATO is directly involved, right? That's all it takes. That's all it takes at this point. So the president of Serbia or prime minister, I'm not 100% sure. He's correct, right? We're very, very close to a war. I think that's obvious, so everybody knew that. This is an interesting article I wanted to cover. Putin cites media discrimination, tit-for-tat law. Pretty much it says, if a country like the United States or whoever bans Russian media or media related to Russia like RT, then Russia will retaliate and ban media outlets from those countries. Interesting law. I don't know, down here it says for society, the state, and the official symbols of the Russian Federation. I get where he's coming from. It doesn't seem like the best action, though, right? But then again, he doesn't care what the West thinks. I was going to say, the West already calls him this dictator that shuts down dissent and all this stuff. So this doesn't help with that image, but who cares at this point, right? If you're Putin, who cares what the West thinks? They're going to lie and distort everything you do and say no matter what, so who cares? But this is an interesting law. I believe in the United States this would probably be against the First Amendment, but it's not like our government really follows the Constitution anymore. Those were all the articles that I wanted to make a point of covering. We got through them pretty quick. We'll scroll through here, see what else is going on. If anyone's watching and has anything they want me to address, just drop a comment in the chat and I'll address it. Oh yeah, this is interesting. Tulsi Gabbard recently said world is nearing the brink of nuclear war. Quote, the American people need to understand the seriousness of the situation that the Biden administration and leaders in Washington have put us in, unquote. She said this on Fox News. The Hawaii Democrat who was among the candidates who Biden defeated to win his party's 2020 presidential nomination, called the stepping back to focus on, quote, the big picture and the great threat that we face, which is the reality that this war is continuing to escalate, unquote. She's completely correct, right? The war is continuing to escalate. As the U.S. and the West sends them more and more arms, and as they get more and more advanced, it's escalating, right? And as the winter comes, and we see Europe possibly collapse, much of it, right? We're right there a bit. We're right there. We're this close to World War III, and that's something people don't seem to understand, or maybe a great deal of people do recognize it and they don't want to address it. Who knows? The psychological things that go into it, but I mean, we are very close. Recently the New York, I believe it's mentioning it here, recently the New York public service, they made a public service announcement, some New York transportation agency, about what to do if a nuclear strike occurs. It looked like something straight out of the Cold War. We're very close to nuclear war, and it's very preventable, right? The West just has to stop being aggressive, let other countries exist. Let Russia be Russia. Let them sell natural gas. Let them sell oil. Right? That's what they want. It benefits everybody. Right? It's cheap for Europe. The United States has always bought Russian oil, right? So it benefits everyone. Just let other countries exist, and we won't be on the brink of World War III. The Italian Prime Minister plans to resign. Apparently the President of Italy rejected his resignation. I don't really know what that means. If a guy says he quits, then he quits, right? But we'll see what happens there. This will be the fourth European Prime Minister to step down in the last few months. The fifth Prime Minister altogether, if you count, or Prime Minister or President, if you count Sri Lanka's president that obviously fled the country recently. But this shows you that these policies the EU, or these sanctions the EU have gone through with, are not helping the EU. It's hurting the EU. It's hurting the people that push the sanctions through. Olaf Scholz this is gonna happen to Scholz at some point. I would be surprised to see Scholz make it through the end of the year, right? And that goes for many other European leaders too. We'll see what happens with Macron. Obviously, Boris Johnson has already left. The British government is in ruins. This is going to continue across the EU. The EU is in for a bad winter, possibly the worst winter they've had in since World War II, right? Since the end of World War II, probably. This is very bad for the EU. It's going to be bad for the United States as well, but the EU is going to be devastated. Like I said earlier, the best the EU can hope for is bad. They can just hope that it's not catastrophic. And that's a very grim place to be. Very, very grim place to be. EU prepares for gas cutoff, says the media. the bloc will reportedly advise citizens to ration should Russia switch off the tap. That's funny. Obviously they try to put it on Russia, act like Russia has no reason to stop sending the gas. Russia, at the beginning of the conflict, they continued to send the gas, right? As a matter of fact, much of the gas that they send to the EU goes through pipelines that run through Ukraine. And for decades, Russia has paid transit fees to Ukraine. And even after they started their operation back in February, they continued to send gas through these pipelines, and they continued to pay these transit fees to Ukraine, right? So Russia, they show over and over they are a good faith actor. Russia is trustworthy relative to the EU, right? The West is not trustworthy. We've discussed that multiple times on that channel now. You can't trust the West. Nothing they say means anything. If it becomes profitable for them to go back on what they say, they will do it like that. Like that. They don't care. They are not trustworthy. And Russia actually tried for years to get the EU to sign long-term contracts, to lock in a price for the gas, and to sign a long-term, multi-year contract that would mean Russia would supply the EU with gas at a fixed price for years. The EU denied, right? The EU over and over and over denied to do this. They didn't want to initiate or enter in any long-term contracts, any long-term deals with Russia. And now look where they are, right? They're shooting themselves. They're committing suicide. Literally, people are going to die because of these policies. It's not just some people are going to have to, it's going to have to be a bit colder in your house, or, you might have a little less food to eat. No, people are going to die, right? Parts of Italy, there will be starvation because of these policies. Parts of Europe, people will freeze to death. Most of Europe, people are going to have to choose between eating or heating their home, right? Do you want to eat? Do you want to heat? Right? That's what they have to choose between. That's incredibly grim. And here in the United States, it'll be bad. It'll be not good, right? Inflation is going to continue to go up. There's no stop there. Gas will continue to be expensive. All of, everything that's bad right now is going to continue that way, at least economically. I mean, gas prices, food prices going up, all of that. The United States, though, won't get it as bad as Europe. Europe will be devastated. And that's not even to touch on Africa and the third world, right? The global south, people have already been starving to death since COVID. Malnutrition-related deaths in Africa and various other third world countries have skyrocketed, right? And that's going to continue, right? Russian grain is having a hard time reaching the world market because of the idiotic sanctions. Ukrainian output is down this year. Obviously, Ukrainian grain is having a bit of a hard time reaching the markets too, not because Russia is blocking it, but because Ukraine mined their ports, right? Ukraine mined the ports in Odessa and various other ports, which has, and they don't know where those mines are now, right? Because these mines float, and they floated off. They don't know where they are. A civilian ship actually hit one of these mines in the last week. I think I may have touched on this on the last stream. They don't know where these mines are, and that's a major issue. That's a major issue because, you can't have ships going through the seas when there's just mines drifting around out there, right? That's what's going on. Obviously, here in the West, they try to say it's Russia. Russia is blocking Ukraine from getting the grain on the market now. Russia has been a good faith actor in working to get the Ukrainian grain on the market. The Ukrainians are not, right? The Ukrainians seem to even want to leverage getting the grain out for more weapons, right? We've seen that. We've seen the Ukrainians behind closed doors saying, we're going to hold up this grain until you give us more weapons. It's really gross. People are going to die. Like I said, it's very serious. It's not a joke. It's not, this is going to be bad. This is going to be catastrophic for many people around the world, especially in the global south. But, liberals here in the West, they don't care about those people. They don't care about middle class people in the United States. They're definitely not going to care about, poor people in Somalia and Ethiopia, right? They don't care, right? Biden's bombing them, right? Their president's bombing them, right? Every day. The poorest country in the world, Somalia, the second poorest country in the world after Afghanistan. Biden's bombing them, and why is Afghanistan the poorest country in the world? I don't think I need to explain that to you. Not good. I didn't even really read much of that article, did I? This looks interesting. Beijing explains what international community means to Western media. When Western mainstream media talks about the international community, it actually means the West and its allies. You're right, he's completely correct, right? What does international community mean? He said, it appears that's all he said, actually, on that quote. Interesting. You scroll down, this is perfect, right? The international community in reality is everyone, right? It's the international community. It's all 8 billion of us, right? All 8 billion people in the world. But really, when the U.S. or the West says the international community, they mean the United States, the UK, Canada, right? Western Europe, Australia, Japan, South Korea. That's who they mean, right? And that accounts for what? What does all this account for? 1 billion people, maybe? It's absurd, man. It's narcissism on a grand scale. It's narcissism on a world scale. It's truly insane. I believe we've touched on the Brittney Griner situation in this channel before, so I should continue following it. I saw she was in court today, the 14th. Like I covered last time, she pled guilty to having hashish oil, pretty much weed, right? I don't know exactly what hashish oil is. Think of it as weed. She was in possession of weed. She was arrested at the airport, and she's now facing anywhere between 5 and 10 years in prison. And she pled guilty. We'll see what happens. Russia says they won't. Russia has said that they won't go for a prisoner transfer or anything like that until after her trial. But she's pled guilty. That'll probably expedite the trial. I don't know how the trial goes down, right? Obviously, I'm not there. But this will be interesting to see. Really, in reality, Brittney Griner, if this happened 4 years ago, this wouldn't be as big of a story, right? But it's the timing of this that makes it so big. Obviously, the U.S. is using it to make Russia look terrible. Like, oh, they immediately go to the woke identity stuff. You know, she's a gay black woman that Russia is locking up for. You know, they of course fail to mention that, you know, what she's being charged for in Russia is what, you know, hundreds of thousands of black men and women have been sent to prison for in the United States. Here in the United States, many people of all races, especially black though, have been sent to prison for having a joint, having a gram of weed on them, right? Having a couple grams of weed, something for personal consumption. You go to prison. How many men in the United States have gone to prison for that? A massive amount, right? A disgusting amount. And you know, when they go to prison, what do? Right? They go and they do prison labor where they don't really get paid. I think they get paid like 2 cents an hour or something, and they produce these products for these companies. It's indentured servitude, right? It's legalized slavery. It's legalized indentured servitude, right? I believe the 13th Amendment, it actually, the 13th Amendment, of course, says, slavery, indentured servitude is not allowed in the United States. But I do believe it actually leaves a bit of a loophole for these private prisons, right? I don't know what Russian prisons are like. I'm not going to pretend to, but it's hard to get much worse than the conditions in American prisons, right? And even the UK says this, right? The UK, they originally declined to extradite Julian Assange, and they said it was because of U.S. prison conditions, right? It's hard to get much worse than American prison conditions, right? In the United States, they operate an illegal fucking torture facility in Cuba, right? The U.S. is far and away has the worst prison conditions in the world. They have the most people in prison. The conditions are terrible. They use them as slave labor. Right, you hear people criticize gulags, which I'm sure horrendous things happen with gulags and people are wrongfully detained. And the Soviet Union, we know the Soviet Union was indeed authoritarian, but you hear all about those gulags. You never hear it that talked about with the U.S. Right? Our prisons, our private prison, our private prison labor system is somehow, it's somehow above reproach, right? It's like I said, it's narcissism on a grand scale. It's narcissism on a governmental, societal scale. That's really, that sums up a lot of the West and a lot of the U.S. culture. I think especially elite culture it's narcissism on a grand scale, right? And it's really not surprising. Caleb Moffat always talks about Ayn Rand and how Ayn Rand is sort of an ideological I don't know what you want to call it, inspiration for many people in power. He talks about people like Paul Ryan and I believe Ilhan Omar said that she's inspired by Ayn Rand, and that's what Ayn Rand talks about, right? She talks about the individual above all else, the virtue of selfishness. She talks about, right? It's no surprise that when the leaders of a country believe in things like that, the elites of a country believe in things like that, that you're going to have narcissism on a grand scale, and that's what you get. That's what I believe you see in American policies. It's narcissism on a grand scale. What else do we have here? Oh yes, we should continue to follow Kaliningrad, because that's a major situation, right? Lithuania has been blockading Russian rail transit, Russian trains from going to and from Kaliningrad. Like I touched on in a stream before, Kaliningrad is a part of Russia. Kaliningrad is as much a part of Russia as Alaska is a part of the United States, right? Imagine if Canada suddenly said no more rail transit, no more automobile transit going to and from Alaska for the United States. What would the United States do, right? What would the United States do? I imagine they'd respond pretty quickly. Now, Russia's shown great restraint with Lithuania doing this. Of course, Lithuania had a prior commitment. They agreed with Russia. They had a promise to Russia to always allow this rail to transit back and forth, and they've broken that. And they're pretty much begging Russia to take action. And you have the EU telling them to, back down, calm down, right? The EU Commission. And Lithuania has continued it. My guess is, the EU probably isn't sincere and they probably don't really care that much if Lithuania backs down. It's very possible that, the United States, there's forces influencing Lithuania's decision, people that want Lithuania to get attacked by Russia so that they can say, look, like we said, Russia wants to attack everybody. They want to invade all of Europe. They could continue their Russophobia, right? They can use Russia attacking Lithuania to further that. But it does appear that this may get resolved without military action, which is a good thing. Let's read through the article here. New EU guidance has removed the majority of restriction on the transit of Russian goods to the country's exclave of Kaliningrad. The governor, I guess, of Kaliningrad said, adding that Russia will continue to seek the removal of the road transit ban. On Wednesday, the EU Commission issued additional guidance after Lithuania, citing EU sanctions against Moscow, banned shipments via its territory. Russia called the measures unprecedented and illegal, right, which they are. Like I said, Lithuania had previously agreed to never do this. They previously agreed to always let Russian rail go through, and they're breaking that promise, right? That is illegal. If you sign something saying you will do something, and then you stop doing that, that is illegal. That's basic law. Everyone understands that. A 60-year-old understands that, right? Some 60-year-olds, maybe not all of them. The EU Commission's latest guidance allows Russia to resume rail transit under certain conditions. Here's a quote, more than 80% of the restrictions imposed on Kaliningrad transit. What does that mean? I guess we should read all of it to get the context. In an interview, the governor described the EU's move as a victory for Russian diplomacy, explaining that it lifted, quote, more than 80% of the restrictions. Very interesting. However, the governor said a significant part of the goods remain under restrictions, as the road transit of sanctioned goods is still not allowed. Estimates that the ban affect 500 to 700,000 tons of cargo per year out of the 2.7 to 3 million tons of all sanctioned goods. It's very interesting. I don't know much about the history of Kaliningrad. I have wondered many times in the past few weeks and before how Kaliningrad exactly is a part of Russia. I'm sure I could find answers to that pretty quickly if I did some reading. But let's take a look just in case anybody isn't aware. Kaliningrad is here, right? And it's a part of Russia, right? It's as much a part of Russia as Alaska is a part of the United States. So, Lithuania, Belarus here. Russian rail transits through Belarus into Kaliningrad right here, and it has to pass through Lithuania to get there. And Lithuania's been blocking it, right? Even though they've made prior agreements to never do such a thing, which is illegal, right? Once again, if you make a commitment, if you sign a contract and then you go against that contract, that is illegal, right? So, very interesting. Looks like we're kind of running out of things. Oh, there was an interesting video that I'd like to show. Hopefully it doesn't get taken off of YouTube because of this. This is from this is an operation that the Russians carried out in the very beginning of their special operation, back in very beginning. Right, this was one of the first things they launched. Actually, they had several many helicopters land troops at the airport in Kiev. We'll watch some of the video here.
Это на память потомкам.
Once again, this is an airport in Kiev that the troops are at.
Налево уходи, уходи.
Лево, гражданский! Гражданский! Гражданский наблюдать! Окна! Наблюдать!
We'll go ahead and stop there. It's a 5-minute video. I think you get the point. It's an interesting video. You can go watch it on RT. I believe they were showing it on the RT International broadcast that you could view on either RT's website or Rumble. I don't want to show too much war porn, right? That's never good. That's never good. Well, we're kind of running out of things to talk about here. I was only going to stream for about an hour. I think we've gone for about... Well, I guess we did have that delay of that computer freezing, so we've only gone for about 45 minutes. If anybody watching has anything they want me to address, just, comment and I'll talk about it. Well, let's read about this. U.S. and South Korea harassing North Korea more. So they carried out a F-35A, right? They carried out a joint exercise with South Korea to harass North Korea. They do this a lot. They did it a lot in the Obama administration. They would have all types of aircraft, nuclear capable aircraft, all types of things fly right up to North Korean airspace, and it was meant as an act of aggression towards North Korea, right? They tried to bully North Korea. Trump actually stopped those exercises. One of the few things that Trump did well at when he was president was a bit of de-escalation with North Korea. I don't know what Trump says the best achievement of his administration is, but that's definitely up there, right? That's definitely up there as his diplomacy with North Korea. Now, obviously, it fell through because Trump's not a serious person, and the United States isn't a serious country. But that was one of the shining moments of his presidency, right? That picture of him stepping over into North Korea, shaking Kim's hand. That was cool to see, right? Trump. Are we live still? Okay, I think we are. More technical difficulties. I'll have to get all this figured out. North Korea cut off by Kiev. That's nothing for North Korea. North Korea's been cut off by a bunch of the world for 50 years. It's nothing new for them. They will persevere like they always do, right? Them and Cuba. Very, it's a heroic story, really, them and Cuba, what they've been able to persevere through. Even if, of course, yes, there is authoritarianism. These countries have to be authoritarian. Look at the amount of pressure they're under. But, no matter the amount of authoritarianism, it is amazing what they've been able to do under such extreme pressure. Such extreme pressure. I mean, imagine being Cuba and being under a 60-year embargo. Imagine North Korea the same way, forced starvation in your country. And to persevere through that and to raise living standards like Cuba's done, right? Cuba's raised living standards through those conditions. They really persevered. Not a whole lot here that I think is this is interesting. The U.S. told to stop stirring up trouble at sea. The U.S. always does this, right? The U.S. Navy is incredibly aggressive. Once again, Western media will always try to frame it like these other countries are aggressive. Like, they'll show those videos of Iran's coastal patrol boats going back past U.S. aircraft carriers, and of course the boats have a machine gun mounted on the front. So, they could say, look how aggressive Iran is being with these boats. Meanwhile, where is this taking place, right? Is this taking place off the coast of California? Is this taking place in the Gulf of Mexico? No. It's taking place in the Persian Gulf, right? What is Persia? Iran. Iran is Persia, right? It's taking place in Iran's territorial waters. And we're supposed to believe that Iran is being aggressive? It's absurd, right? It's absurd. So it looks like China accuses Washington of attempting to undermine peace and stability in the Pacific. It's of course what they're doing. And they're also very aggressive, not just towards Iran, but also towards China with their Navy. They routinely carry the U.S. Navy routinely has carrier strike groups carry out these aggressive and provocative exercises in the South China Sea. Now, this is all about trade routes, right? We've touched on this many times now, Atlanticism, right? It's all about controlling trade routes. They want to control the South China Sea because a huge amount of global trade goes through there. And, that's not going to happen. Ultimately, they're not going to be able to control the South China Sea. It doesn't belong to the United States. It belongs to the countries there, near the South China Sea, right? Some of it belongs to China, some of it belongs to other nations bordering it. It doesn't belong to the United States. And the United States, they're seeing their grip slowly, slip all around the world. That's what they're seeing, and they're panicking. We see that with, the Ukraine has only, accelerated that process, and they're scrambling, trying to hold on to power. And, ultimately they're not going to be able to. It'll be interesting to see what the West does, what the elites do. I saw in Caleb's last stream, he talked about how the West will likely have to come to terms. The elites will have to come to terms that, okay, Russia is going to exist, China is going to exist. We have to deal with that. Instead of trying to pretend like we can get them off the map, instead of pretending like we can fight a war and erase them, they have to get over that. They're going to have to work with them. It's on some level. Whatever level China and Russia allows, really, because like we've said many times, the West is not serious, the West can't be trusted. But it'll be very interesting to see what they do, because they have to come to terms that China and Russia, Iran, BRICS, these countries and these organizations are going to exist, and they're going to have to deal with it. And they're going to have to try to find a way to work within it. Or maybe not. Maybe they go to isolationist, policies. That's what Trump is all about, right? We'll see what happens. Obviously it'll take years to play out, but it's very interesting to speculate what they'll do. They'll have to come to terms, though, that Russia, China, Iran, BRICS, the Eurasian Economic Union, the Belt and Road Initiative, they'll have to come to terms with this. And hopefully, ultimately, the U.S. can join in on this stuff, right? That's, if I was all of a sudden made president of the United States somehow, that would be something I'd try to do. Obviously, we'd have to gain trust back, but ultimately, I'd like to join the Belt and Road Initiative. I'd like to join BRICS. I'd like for the United States to join this and to work with the rest of the world, or work with the rest of humanity to, lift humanity up instead of trying to keep humanity down, which is what the United States government currently does. It's what they've pretty much always done, is they try to keep humanity down. And anyone who tries to do the opposite, they fight against. You see that now. They're fighting against BRICS, and they're fighting against the Belt and Road. You know, there's every region that they have an issue with that involves trade routes, right? You know, they talk about the Uyghur Muslim genocide they've made up. There's of course no evidence to support it, but you know, where is that at? I don't know how to say the name exactly, but it's Xinjiang. It's in that part of China, that region of China. And why is that region of China so significant? Is because the Belt and Road Initiative runs right through it, right? The New Silk Road runs right through it. Trade routes run right through it. It's all about trade routes, right? Atlanticism. If you want to understand the thinking of the elites in the West and the governments of the West, you have to understand Atlanticist. You have to understand Atlanticism, right? Right? The Atlanticist pathology, you'll hear people call it. They want to control the trade routes. We'll read about the Russia-Ukraine grain here because it's very important, and then I might stop the stream after that, unless anyone comments something they want me to talk about. So this article is from yesterday. Russia and Ukraine have agreed to establish a joint coordination center on grain exports in Istanbul that will include representatives from all parties. Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar told local media following the four-way talks that also involved Turkey and the United Nations. Quote, an agreement has been reached on technical issues such as joint controls at the destination points and the safety of navigation on the transfer routes. That's very important, right? To think about the safety of navigation on the transfer routes. We talked about how Ukraine mined their own ports, and they don't know where those mines are now, right? The mines have drifted off, because that's what things do. When you put it in the water, they drift off, especially when unreliable people like the Ukrainians do it. The Ukrainian military has shown that they're not the most reliable, they're not the smartest people when it comes to decision making. And that's what we're seeing here. They've allowed these mines to drift off, and that's now affecting the ability to export grain, which is going to affect the global food supply, which is going to have devastating effects on the third world, like we were talking about earlier. Devastating effects. People are going to die. We've already seen a rise in malnutrition-related deaths since COVID, and it's only going to go up now. It's only going to go up, and it's because of Western policies, and it's because of the West. It's because of Ukraine, right, mining their ports. I'm sure at the order of the West. Like I said, my theory, I don't think it's a crazy one at all, is that every action the Ukrainian military makes is really coming from the Pentagon. It's coming from Whitley, right? It's coming from the United States. They're telling the military what to do every single order, probably, right? At least every major order, every major strike, every major action they take, they're told to do it by the West. I would be very surprised to find out that's not the case. I think I'm going to start to end the stream here. We've gone for about an hour. It's good so far. Yeah, you know, with these streams, you know, I can only just talk for so long, you know. As the audience grows, hopefully more comments will grow and I can address some things that you guys want to talk about. But, you know, until then, I will just ramble, I guess. Taxi drivers protest in Rome. We're going to continue to see that grow all across Europe, right? Protests of all kinds. Google and Microsoft retrench as recession looms. U.S. explains how Russian oil price cap would work. Let's read about that, right? We covered this a little bit already. This is from yesterday. The U.S. is planning to limit... oh, this is the article. Same article, right? No, it's not, actually. The U.S. is planning to limit the price paid for Russian oil, but at a level that would still be profitable enough for production to be continued. It's funny, right? They talk about sanctioning Russian gas and how people shouldn't buy gas from Russia, and they try to say it's because, you know, if you buy Russian gas, then you're supporting Russian atrocities in Ukraine. Of course, they never say that about Saudi gas, right? They don't say if you buy Saudi gas, then you're, you know, supporting their genocide in Yemen, right? They never say that. You know, and also they make up the Russian atrocities in Ukraine. The Saudi and American-backed atrocities in Yemen are very, very real. Very, very, very real. The atrocities that they say for Russia, most of them are fake. You know, you dive into them and they're all fake. Bucha was bullshit. that theater in Mariupol, it all ends up being bullshit. The ballistic missile that hit a train station with civilians, it was a Tonka-U Ukrainian missile. The Russians, I don't even think, really use those missiles anymore. It's always bullshit, right? Everything's made up. Just recently, just in the last couple days, the Ukrainians launched they launched a missile and another missile, because that's how you counter missiles, right? And this Ukrainian missile, hit an apartment building on accident, I believe. I'm sure it was an accident, at least this time. Normally it's not. Normally they do deliberately strike civilians. This time it's likely an accident. But the Western media immediately started covering it and showed, look, Russia struck a sorry, I got a text. Russia struck an apartment building, which of course they didn't, right? They struck something nearby. The Ukrainian missile that they launched to intercept the Russian missile missed, hit the apartment building. It's almost always a lie. It's been a lie every single time. You have no reason to trust Western media, right? That's the thing, is they lie all the time. Everything they say is a lie. They have no credibility. You shouldn't believe them. They have to provide massive amounts of evidence to be believed at this point. Anything they say. If they say the sky is blue, I'd maybe question it. Go outside, see what's going on, because they are probably lying to you, right? Let's continue with this article, though. Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, she says, we have heard some concern about the possibility that Russia would simply stop producing. I would say that it doesn't really make a lot of sense. As a Russian response. We would expect to set the price cap at a level that would certainly be profitable for Russia to continue to produce, right? So, they want to sanction Russian gas, but at the same time, they're begging Russia to not stop producing gas. Now, I don't see why Russia would do that, right? Russia depends on the revenues made from selling their gas on the international market, but continuing with the article, it says, according to the official, the price cap mechanism would require that any tanker carrying Russian oil only receive financing and assurance from U.S., UK, and European Union institutions. I don't see why Russia would ever agree to that, right? Why would Russia ever agree to give the U.S., the UK, and the EU, some type of power over their oil? That's absurd. Why would anyone in the West expect them to do that? Right, Russia's oil is Russia's oil, right? It's theirs to have, it's theirs to sell, it's theirs to do as they please with. Just same with American, right? Same with any nation, right? American oil is American oil. Now, of course, that's actually not the case. American oil really belongs to companies like Shell and Exxon, Chevron, BP, the companies, and Russian oil largely belongs to Russia, right? They have Rosneft. And they have Gazprom. Rosneft is the state-run oil company, and Rosneft, or Gazprom, is the state-owned natural gas company, right? Russia's oil belongs to Russia, and they use it to better Russia, right? Which is perfect, right? It's what any nation should do. It's what any rational nation does. Any rational nation would have their natural resources benefit that nation, right? Not the profits of a few super monopolies. Continuing with the article. Janet Yellen, I assume this means, noted that Russia had in the past based its budget on an oil price of around $40 per barrel. Meanwhile, the global benchmark Brent crude was trading for about $100 a barrel as of Wednesday. Yellen is currently in Asia on a trip aimed at garnering support for the price cap mechanism. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I don't think I fully understand the point of the price cap. Well, I understand the point of the price cap, right? It's to cap the price, but I don't understand why they expect the Russians to go through with it. I understand why China would support it, right? If you could cap oil, then it's that would be very good for countries that need a lot of it, like China. We will see how that plays out. I think that might be it here for me tonight. It has been fun. Once again, drop a like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter. Yeah, any engagement helps, right? Especially in the early stages of this channel, trying to grow. Any engagement helps. If you hate what I say, comment. Tell me how much you hate what I say. That helps as well. Yeah, I think that's going to be it for the night. Unless anyone has anything they want me to say, I'll stay on here for 30 more seconds or so in case anyone has anything they want me to talk about before I leave. But it's been a good stream. I'm enjoying. I enjoy streaming like this. Like I said at the beginning of the stream, I did order a new mic, so that'll be better, right? I know the audio with this mic is a bit rough right now, so that'll get better. I do plan on maybe switching up my streaming software to StreamYard, is what I've been recommended. So I'll probably move to that. Yeah, this is fun. I enjoy doing these. If you enjoy listening, like I said, like, subscribe, follow me here, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Rumble. The Twitter handle is in the description of this video. It's @AntiHeroUSA.